On today's podcast, we're talking about how to write a novel for beginnings. Where do you begin? So make sure and stay tuned.
Hi, and welcome to the Christian Indie Writers Podcast, where we inform, encourage, and support Christian indie writers on their journey toward publication. I'm Christina Catane, and I write Christian fantasy.
I'm Jennifer Carl Tong, and I write historical Christian romance.
I'm Jamie Hirschberger. I write short fiction under the pen name J.R. Nichols.
Okay, so welcome everybody to the podcast. We really appreciate all of our live chatters, and we also really appreciate our listeners who are listening to podcasts from all kinds of different platforms. We really love that you're listening to us, and we would love to hear from you. So if you want to shoot us a message on social media or an email, we would love to hear from you, and especially if you've done the writing sprint. We really love that. So we like to start each show with a section we call What's Up. And that's where we kind of go around and we all say what's up with us in the last week or so. So, Jamie, do you want to kick us off with the What's Ups?
Sure. If I talk, maybe I won't fall asleep. We were talking before we went live how we're all just like today trying to just be awake. What is in the air? I just don't even know.
Maybe it's because Rhonda's not here. Maybe she's our ray of sunshine and we never realized it.
Yes, she's our little perky pick-me-up person. But what I actually have for you is another installment of The Stoics Say and the Bible Says. And it's a bit lengthy. This is from the Daily Stoic, Ryan Holiday, April 6th. Prepare yourself for negativity. And this is Marcus Aurelius, who wrote in Meditations. When you first rise in the morning, tell yourself, I will encounter busybodies, ingrates, egomaniacs, liars, the jealous, and cranks. Then you go and look in the mirror. No, I'm just kidding. That's just me, maybe. Anyway, they are all stricken with these afflictions because they don't know the difference between good and evil. Because I have understood the beauty of good and the ugliness of evil, I know that these wrongdoers are still akin to me, and that none can do me harm or implicate me in ugliness, nor can I be angry at my relatives or hate them, for we are made for cooperation. So I think that's really good advice. And I almost asked for help from you ladies to try to find a Bible verse that parallels with that. And now I have lost my Bible verse. But basically, Matthew 6:27, I think is what it was. And the reason that I'm stammering is because I'm wanting to sing it in my head.
Your kids,
Luke, it's Luke. Luke 6:27. If someone, but I say unto you which hear, love your enemies. Do good to them which hate you, bless them that curse you, and pray for them which despitefully use you. And I don't think it's necessarily saying the same thing, but a theme of the Stoics seems to be over and over, why are you surprised that humanity acts the way that humanity does? Because, well, it's, the nature of the world. It's the nature, whatever your theology teaches you about the existence of evil or sin in the world. It's just the way it is. Why do you act like it's some kind of shocking surprise? And all you can control is your response to it. And so over and again, it seems like those same messages are coming. And I think it's some real wisdom there. What do you ladies think?
It really reminds me of the quote from Mother Teresa that says, people are often unreasonable, irrational, and self-centered. Forgive them anyway. If you are kind, people may accuse you of selfish or ulterior motives. Be kind anyway. And then she goes down this list. If you're successful, if you're honest, if you're happy, just people are going to criticize you. Just do it anyway.
Yeah,
it reminds me of.
And I think at the end of the day, you know, the Stoics really believed in being better to make a better world. And I think that that's an admirable goal, but it's also sort of a gift you give yourself, I believe, because if you can figure out immunity to your external circumstances and to always have, you know, the peace of Christ inside, well, then who can steal that from you? If you're a slave to someone else's bad attitudes rubbing off on you or something like that, it's kind of a bondage, you know. And this is as someone who has not arrived.
Everybody who has, raise your hand.
Right.
Right. No kidding. I'm thinking about, as you're talking to, I'm thinking about this little old lady who's passed on, but that in my church growing up, that I just loved her. And as a kid, I couldn't really figure out why I just loved her so much. But like, she always so smiling. And like, it wasn't until I was an adult that I realized the adversity that she'd been through in life. And you would have never known it, because everything that and then whenever I would talk with her, of course, you know, even as a teenager, I'd be like, oh, blah, 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 blah. And she would have something positive to say. But think about it this way, Jenny, every time. And I just loved that lady because she just always had like what you're talking about, like, just like, this is the world. The world is always going to be like this, right? But I don't know, she just had a piece about her that I just always envied and always like wanted to strive to have. So that's what I was thinking about.
I think that is what we should aspire to be to others. That's being salt and light, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes.
Great. I like that. Thanks, Jen.
My favorite preacher always says, always be redemptive. Like, so no matter what people do or things around you, always be redemptive.
So is that your husband, or is there another favorite preacher?
I'm going to plead the fifth. No. My second favorite preacher. I'm sorry, misspoke.
Yeah. That's the best. I know what preacher you're talking about, actually. I'm pretty sure. So that's so funny. That's why I asked you. All right. What about you? What's up, Tina?
Well, I didn't get to say this last week because I had to be in character for April Fool's Day.
What are you talking about?
So
that was a legit episode.
You'll notice I actually have clothes on this week. So.
Okay, stop. For those of you that did not watch or hear last week's episode, you're gonna have to go back and listen to it to understand what Tina just said. Because
of all times all the times for my friend to discover us, it was last week. And then I mentioned to her, I was like, because she watched a couple other episodes, I'm like, oh, so my friend Rhonda, and she's like, is she the one in the robe? So Tina, now you are forever the one in the robe to her. That's how she will know.
I didn't get to tell you guys that I sent my manuscript off for final edits and proofreading.
Yay!
So it's like a huge weight off my shoulders, and I'm so happy. And now I'm working on the cover for book 2, and I decided to do myself a favor. And what I did was I pulled up the old, oh my gosh, my brain just Photoshop. I don't know why I couldn't think of Photoshop.
Because it's this morning. I'm telling you, people, like we spent ourselves last week. Like, we're never going to have an episode that good again. And then this week, we have nothing left for our audience. I'm telling you.
Anyway, I just took the background image out of the old cover and put a new background image of a different color.
Yep.
And I'm changing the title and the blurb. That's it.
Yeah, because then everything else is already there. I do the same thing. I mean, like I do a little more tweaking with the images and stuff, but yeah, that way the name is always in the same spot, and the book number is always in the same spot. Yeah.
And I did have to re-download my font. That took me like a whole day to figure out why my font wasn't working. And now I'm struggling with the blurb. Like, blurbs are terrible. I hate blurbs. So like that's where I am. I'm getting the cover done, and I don't know if you guys can see this is my new Kanban for this quarter. And all of this stuff is my cover stuff that I have to do. So I'm hoping to have that done by the 15th and move on to the publish section in the middle.
That's awesome.
So that's what's up with me. What's up with you, Jen?
Well, I'm sitting here hoping nobody looks at my Kanban behind me because it hasn't changed in like weeks. So, and you could, I put it where everyone can see it. Why did I do that to myself? So yeah, I have gotten a lot of behind the scenes stuff done. Editing, I got a little bit of editing done. What I did do, the big thing I was, so you guys know I mentioned that my husband got laid off. Yes. And I was going to, if you guys remember, load Scrivener onto my laptop so that I could have, because now my normal laptop is now a desktop. I was going to have it portable to be able to take it with me when I would go visit my mother for when she's sleeping, I could work. Well, then he got laid off. I'm like, I'm not spending any money. Well, guess what? You can get Scrivener, download a sample, a trial for 30 days. And this is the cool thing about Scrivener. It's not 30 calendar days. It's 30 work days. So if you don't open it up for a week, those 7 days don't count against you. So I can go ahead and do my editing until like my husband goes back to work. And I'm very excited about that. So I've been doing that. I did that. I got that all set up on my computer. And yeah. Oh, also I want to mention, if those of you, we talked a few weeks ago about email marketing websites, and I got an email from Fussy Librarian. If you've never booked with them, they now are right now running a special with 20% off. So if you have never done an email marketing website promotion, you may want to go check it out right now because it's 20% off. And I'm not getting any kickback on that. I just think it's a great deal. So
awesome. Awesome. Okay.
All right. We only have one what's up. Everyone's kind of quiet today about that. But Shell says, what's up? Got reviews up for the first two, Love in Lansing. Oh, I didn't read ahead. I just saw that Shell said, what's up? So I'll read it again. What's up? Got reviews for the first two Love in Lansing books, which are my books. Thank you so much, Shell. I really appreciate that. Oh, that's so sweet. And Leah says, I always use the last book to make the next. It's such a great shortcut. It really is.
Yeah. So. Yeah, I was sitting there like trying to brainstorm covers, and I'm like, what are you doing? Why don't you just use the same image?
As long as you do
tie it all together.
Yeah, as long as you do a save as. Because you don't want to just copy over that, which I have to make sure I don't do that, because you never know when you have to go in and tweak your cover or do something.
I did the save as first.
Yes.
Yes. That was the first thing I did, because I know myself, and I would just hit save or shut it or something, and I would be messed up. Okay, so I wish Rhonda was here. Did we ever get her head on a stick so we could do her what's up?
No.
Rhonda can't be with us. She's got some stuff going on, and we really miss her and her bright ray of sunshine personality. So pray for her if you think of her. Okay, so let's get on to our topic of the day. Today, we are talking about how to write a novel for beginners. Where do you begin? So this is the podcast that I wish I would have found like 4 years ago. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because I don't know. I feel like I stopped and started and went this direction and went that direction. And if someone had just said, this is what you do first, that would have been so helpful.
So many of our listeners are newbies, which is kind of why we started this podcast, because we didn't have anything like this when we were newbies, and we had to figure this all out painfully, like on our own, until we found each other, which was the biggest revelation and the greatest thing that ever happened for my writing career, was finding you ladies in our original writing group. But so we wanted to make sure that, here we've been talking a lot about marketing, and we're going to get into advertising a little bit. And we're getting into these like kind of more advanced, like farther along in your career kind of a thing. And if you're just tuning in and you don't even have your book started yet, don't fear. Like, don't even think about the marketing yet. Don't think about all that stuff. Don't get distracted by that. We're here. Like, this episode is for you. And we have such a great chat. So even the people that are in our chat right now that are farther along, they're here to help too. So if you are listening to this later, come back and check out our chat. I'm sure there's gonna be a wealth of knowledge in there as well.
Oh, for sure. Because there's some people in there that are even further along than we are, and we could go to them sometimes for advice. So, in your guys' opinion, what are you thinking? What is the very first thing that you need to start writing a book?
Well, I think you gotta kinda wanna write a book, which, is what prompted this episode. Is someone kinda said to me, "Well, I've always wanted to write a novel, but I just really don't know, like, how to do it." And, I think that whatever that want to is going to be the thing that's going to keep you going because, if you've been watching the podcast for any amount of time, it's not necessarily a simple process, even though it doesn't necessarily have to be difficult, but you are going to need a really strong why to kind of keep you going through it. So, why do you want to write a book? Are you writing a book to supplement your income, your household income? Do you just have a story that you always knew would be a great book, maybe your own life story? Is it both? But why? You need to want to write the book, I think.
Yeah, and it could be a combination of all those things. I think for me, I always wanted to tell stories. I love to tell stories. And there was something that just that gave me joy about writing a really good sentence that like evoked an emotion or portrayed beauty or something. And then I got hit with an idea that I feel like came from the Lord. And then I was like, hey, I could make money doing this. So it was like a combination of all those things, like culminated together that pushed me forward to do it.
I would agree with that for myself as well. I always wanted to be an author. Like I wrote my first novel, quote unquote, in fourth grade. It was a story, so it wasn't really a novel. In eighth grade, I wrote a full-on novel. It got passed around to all the girls in school. It was like a little like high school romance kind of a book, kind of like we who were reading at that time. And so like I always wanted to be an author, but some point between eighth grade and graduation, I somehow got it in my head that you could make money as a novelist. So I went off to college to be a journalist, which I hated. And so I switched majors a gazillion times and came out with a degree that I kind of bounced around until I finally came back to I want to be an author. And had I known that it was also a viable career, which now it for sure is with indie publishing. Back then, maybe it would have been more difficult, but still, had I realized that, then it would have been a career for me. And I just want a little quick side note, because I'm in some Christian groups on Facebook that some people get shamed for wanting to make money from their books. Don't let anyone shame you. Like, I'm telling you that people that are in ministry are not eating, like grazing on the grass in their backyard and sewing clothes together from the hair that falls out of their German Shepherd. Like they are being paid for their ministry as well. People have to make money to live. So don't let anyone shame you for that. If that's part of your goal is to make money, because it is mine and I am proud of it. So yeah, so the why is definitely important. And I think that if you're here listening to this, you probably already have that, right? You're probably already here with the why. So
I think it's funny you wrote a novel in the 8th grade. I wrote a soap opera and I had like continuing episodes. Like every week I would bring a new episode to pass around to my friends.
That's awesome.
I can't say the title of it on this show, but it was When That Hits the Fan. That was the name of the...
Oh. All right. Okay, so after the want to do it, I would say that the thing you have to have is an idea. Yeah, that's where it starts. And I think that most people that come to me and say they want to write a book, it's because they have an idea already. I would say that like most people come at it with an idea. Not everybody. Like some people might say, I want to be a famous author. So then they want to come find an idea. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. But if they don't have an idea, where do the ideas come from? Like that is the one question that I have gotten from people is I don't have an idea. I know I want to write something. They might have a general idea of the type of thing they want to write, but they just don't have a concrete idea for an actual story.
Oh, I agree. Yeah. So where do we find these ideas?
Well, I think if you you want to write a cozy mystery, that's going to help you tunnel down. Like, for example, or if you want to write, like if you know what you like to read and you want to write that, that's going to help a little because, a cozy mystery is going to have tropes and elements that are going to kind of get you thinking along a certain line.
Okay. So starting with genre, that's a great idea. What do you think, Tina? How do you come up with ideas?
Well, what if questions are really how I do it. And even if it's sometimes the what if question comes up organically, and sometimes I sit down and write a list. So, for instance, my first book, I was teaching a Bible study on the life of Moses, and it was at the part of the life of Moses where God is giving him the law. And this what if question popped into my head. What if we lost the New Testament and had to go back to living under the law? What would that world look like? So that was the organic what if question that led to that idea. But then I had to write a whole list of like, okay, well, what's going to happen in the actual story when I sit down to write it? Well, what if they rebuilt the tabernacle in the Alaskan wilderness? What if the high priest's daughter felt like she could never measure up? Like, so I had these what if questions all the way through. And I didn't get them in the first try. I mean, I had to have a list and pick the best one. And I even ended up rewriting the whole story at one point because it wasn't strong enough. So
I do what ifs as well. I got the idea from author K.M. Weiland. She does lots of help for authors as well. If you guys have never heard of her, go check her out. But she has this whole like what if kind of philosophy, and I use it for coming up with ideas, but I also use it for developing the story. Once I have the idea, then I will sit down and just like randomly write, what if this, what if that, and no idea is off the table, even if it's the most ridiculous. What if aliens showed up in the Old West? Like it gets written down, and I only use a fraction of it, but it's funny how as I'm doing these what ifs, something will come up that I never thought of, and it's perfect. It's exactly what I need. So even if I had to write 50 things down, but I get that one thing, I'm okay with that.
Aliens in the Old West would only be really ridiculous for you because if it was Jamie, she would totally write that.
And it would be the best story ever, right?
Yeah. Well, it would be crazy good.
That's interesting because I was just going to say we did some episodes already on finding inspiration, episodes 10 and 93.
Yep.
Inspiration is everywhere. And in fact, my second nature story was evolved from a question as we were driving down I-69. I look over and I see a ditch and I see water coming out of it. And I imagine to myself that the water is toxic and a raccoon wanders over there and drinks some. And what would happen to that raccoon? And that turned into the story, which has nothing about a radioactive raccoon, but that was what had triggered the initial idea to sit down and write a story about this raccoon. So thanks for the toss there, because that's exactly where I was heading is, you can find the inspiration just in the most random places, put yourself into new environments, and idea will maybe come to you.
Yep.
For example, we went out, we had a family dinner at the Chinese buffet, and my son-in-law's family came. And I hadn't met his sister, and we had talked a little bit, but I had never met her husband. And I never really got a chance. I mean, we were planning a wedding the first time, like when we had conversations. So it was all about the wedding, right? So we started talking like, well, how did you guys meet? And this is what she said. I was a police officer and he was a forensic pathologist, and we met at a crime scene. And I was like, oh, I have so like ideas, right? And she ended up getting shot and quit, and now she works with horses, which was like her passion as a child. So like I could just see that being like the whole thing of like a romance novel, right? Like her real passion is horses. She was a cop, she got shot, like just ideas are everywhere. Just sitting down having a conversation.
So before we move on from this too, we've got some chat that I want to like highlight a little bit. There's a lot, so we're not gonna be able to highlight all of it. But I also want to say that for me, first of all, I want to apologize if you can hear the dogs barking in the background. I can't do anything about it right this second. But for me, writing sprints are also a way that I come up with ideas. Like my whole Widows of the West series is coming from a writing sprint that we did years ago in one of our very first episodes. It might have been the very first episode that I did the writing sprint in. And so you'll see our book back here in the corner, writing 30 days of writing sprint prompts that can help you come up with some ideas as well. But let's see. Leah says, for a book, I started by walking out my front door and took a walk around the block, the potholes, the broken mailbox, and my wacky neighbors. It became a book, Dystopian Adventure. Oh, that's awesome. Let's see what else everyone else is saying. Shell says, turn off the TV and sit and think about things. Always have an eye open for weird things and ways to combine elements to make something new. Agree with that as well. So
another thing that has really generated a lot of ideas for me is reading a really well-written book in my genre. So I really like to read fantasy and I like to write fantasy. And I think it was the Mistborn series by Brandon Sanderson that I read. Mm-hmm. And I had to open a document while I was reading because ideas were just popping out like all over the place.
That's awesome. So kind of like what Jamie said at the beginning was like to use your genre to tunnel down ideas.
Right.
That's awesome.
Right. Okay. I lost where we are on the.
So we have an idea now. So now what do we do next?
Right.
Well, as we were planning this episode, we kind of stumbled across this idea. It was like a couple of analogies. So pick your one. You can think of this as like making a cake, or you can think of this as building like on a skeleton. So like the skeleton's going to start with the actual frame, the bones, and then you're going to add layers of it like muscles and tendons. And a cake is going to have certain ingredients, or you're not going to end up with a cake, right? And so we were talking about certain things that a novel needs. And those big pieces, like the eggs and the flour and the milk, would be things like characters, theme, plot, story, and structure, right? So I guess we'll start talking about the big picture is that you have to have a beginning, middle, and end. Would you all agree?
Yeah.
And we're going to go through these in like a certain order because like we each have our own preferred way of doing this or, you know, but at the end of the day, you still need to have all of these things, even though like you don't want to not do anything unless you have thought of your beginning. Right. So, but you've got to have these things before you can have a novel.
And this is going to actually highlight how Jamie and I write differently too, because I come up with characters first before I have the beginning, middle, and end. Because for me, when I'm reading a book, the characters are more important to me because if I don't care about them, I don't care what happens to them. And so that's just, so I generally know my characters well before I actually know what happens to them, because I have to, and I have these questions that I ask like, and I have them in a document. So some of them are questions are like, where are they from, but the important ones are how they've been hurt. So how they've been hurt kind of like helps to mold like the things that like they'd be sensitive to, and so that I can like I can know like things that like why they're acting the way they're acting, and that will help me decide what should be happening to my characters at the beginning, in the middle, and the end. So they kind of come hand in hand a lot when I'm asking these questions about my my characters. Like, why did John have a limp? What happened to him? And so why would he be like not, as soon as he saw Esther, why would he not fall in love with her immediately? Well, there are reasons for that. And I have to know that about my character as I'm doing that. So
yes.
So they kind of go hand in hand, but I tend to write more, do more work back end with the characters first, where Jamie has to know her story first and then figures out the characters that are playing in the story. Would you agree with that?
And I'm completely different.
Oh, okay. All right, good. Go ahead. Let Jamie answer first, Tina, and then you can.
I just want you to know that if you want to get more into character development, we have several episodes that we already did about that. So you could go back and watch 81, 87, and 133. Because Jen's given some really awesome meat there. And I know you're like, oh, I got to go write this down. But go and check out those episodes too. The thing that I normally do is I write the parts I already know. So I don't worry about having a beginning, middle, and an end, and I don't really worry about anything. I just sit down and start with what I've got, right? Like I just go, like I want to get started. So that's how I would be different. I'm less of a plot it all out and plan and outline person, and more of a get down to the business of actually writing person.
And I think this is why we came up with the whole cake idea.
Yes.
It's because we put the first ingredient in our bowl in different order, but we end up with all the same ingredients at the end before we bake the cake.
Yes, Jen ends up with the beginning, middle, and end. So do I.
Yep. I start with a theme. So I knew that my first book was going to be about living under grace versus living under the law. And then I came up with characters, and then I came up with the beginning, middle, and end. My second book I knew was going to be about forgiveness. I already had the characters from book one. I just had to figure out, okay, how can I tell a story about forgiveness? And I know that my third book is going to be about faith and trust. So how can I put those same characters in a situation where it's going to challenge their faith and their trust? So I always start with a theme, and then characters, and then the beginning, middle, and end.
All right.
So, okay. So we've brainstormed. Now what?
Well, you know what I'm going to say.
No.
If you've listened to this podcast for a hot minute, you're going to know that I'm going to say you got to plot. Like you have to outline and plot this however you want to do it, whether you want to do like an isolation booth like I do. Oh, look, I happen to have one handy right here. Whether you do something like this with all the different acts in it. See, I got different acts going on. Or you do it in outline, or whatever you do. In my opinion, you have to plot. I wrote my first book and it was at 120,000 words. And it was nowhere near the end because I didn't know about story structure. And then that has changed the world for me to like really figure out story structure, figure out how my stories are going to work. And then I stick to that plot. Now that's what I say to do because I'm a plotter. Others are going to disagree. And this will be the time.
I'm going to let you go first on that one, Jamie.
Well, again, I kind of already said my thing is just sit down and write the parts that you know. I had that person who came up to me and said, well, I know I want this to happen and I know I want this to happen. And I said, well, then sit down and write those pieces because the way that and it's interesting. I hope that she watches this episode because if my advice didn't resonate with her, she might feel a little bit better about sitting down and doing an outline like what Jen suggested. But that's just not the advice that I would give because that isn't my process, right? So that's what I love about this particular experiment or podcast that we're doing is that you get different perspectives because we all handle it differently. Mm-hmm. So, Tina, what would you say your next step is once you've finished your brainstorming?
Well, mine is kind of a mixture of the two of you. That's why I wanted to go last because what I do is I basically have scene cards where I know what's going to happen and what it's going to cause to happen next, like in the action. And I also know like the inside motivations of my characters and how it affects them emotionally and affects their decision making. So I have like a double tier kind of outline and I outline 5 scenes at a time. And then I write those scenes. And then I review those scenes and I change my scene cards accordingly because sometimes when you're writing, well, most of the time when I'm writing, things change as you're writing it and things develop. And so I'll go back and change those cards. And once I have all that done, then I go do the next 5. And it's all cause and effect between each of the cards. And so for me, if I had a whole outline like Jen has, I would totally get bored with the story and I would stop wanting to write it. But if I just go like Jamie does and just write what I know, I would be all over the place. And I need my brain needs a little bit more structure than that. And so I have like the best of both worlds in the way that I do it.
That's awesome.
So that's what I do.
If you're looking for a little bit more structure, don't forget, if you sign up for our newsletter, you will get a copy of my romance plot sheet for free. You also can get a copy of our a PDF download of our 30 days of writing sprint prompts, which will help.
And also Rhonda wrote a couple
Yes.
of plotting books. And I can't remember the exact title. How to Plot Your Novel with This Workbook, I believe, is number one. And the second one is How to Plot Your Cozy Mystery with This Workbook by Dee Dee Bowman. Available on Amazon. Okay, so what is the next step, guys?
Sit down and write. I mean, once you have come up with your idea, once you know your characters and you've got a structure, and you've got all your ingredients for your cake, you actually have to sit down and write it. I can't tell you how many people come to me and say, I have this great story idea. I just need you to write it. That's the work of it. The story idea is the fun part. The work is the writing. And if it were just that easy to come up, if the hard part was the story idea and just the writing it was easy, there'd be a lot more books out there. Right?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. There's someone famously would say to me, wouldn't it be great if there was a story, blah, 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 blah. And I'd say, see how easy it is to write a book?
Right.
To that person, because it's like ideas, and that's what's so funny is everybody's like, oh, I'm so afraid someone's going to steal my idea. Well, they probably won't, because that would require them actually doing the work of actually writing the book. And so, I mean, if the book was written, it likely is an idea that was laying around for someone to pick up and write. And there's going to be a lot of overlap and as our writing sprints show, just because one inspiration results in a certain piece of work doesn't mean it's going to come out the same for another person.
Exactly. Even if they did steal your idea, their book is not going to be your book. It'll be a completely different one. And most people don't steal ideas anyway, because every book's already been written, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really. When I was in school and I was to get creative writing assignments, I always got A+. And like comments from my teachers about how great it was. And I discovered that writing a 1,500 to 3,000 word story for English class is a completely different animal to writing a novel.
Yes.
Because now you need 80,000 words, 60 to 80,000 words. Right? And that's not so easy. And so when I was teaching how to write a book to the homeschool co-op that my child was a part of, I would go in every week, or it was every other week, but I would go in and I would say, what's the one thing you have to do to be able to write a book? And by the end of this, I guess it was, I don't know if you want to call it a semester, but at the end of that period of time, they all would say, you have to write. You have to sit down and write, because it takes time to get to 80,000 words, and they have to write a lot more than 80,000 words, because a lot of those words are going to get deleted before you get down to the end.
Right. So we know you have to write. So ladies, what are some suggestions on how to get yourself writing? We need to hustle through the end of this podcast, or the end of this topic. So we know we need to sit down and write. How do we do that?
Well, you make it part of your routine, or, I mean, this is where it goes back to remembering that why, you know what I'm saying? It's the same reason why you stick to any commitment that you make to yourself. A good thing to do is to sign up for something like NaNoWriMo. That's National Novel Writing Month in November, where you commit yourself to 30 days to write 50,000 words. That'll force you to at least write something every day. And don't put any pressure on yourself for what you write to be good. Right, Jen? Because we were talking about writing sprints earlier. Don't think every single word you write is going to end up in your book, because a lot of it is going to be just you discovering your characters and discovering, oh, I didn't really realize this was going to happen. Your characters will do things you didn't expect them to do, and then you'll have to decide, is that staying or going? And a lot of people don't want to erase anything they write, especially when they're brand new. Is that true?
Yes, that was this book here. I'm telling you, like, I deleted so many scenes that I loved. So many scenes that actually were, some of them were quite poetic, like, not to break my arm, pat myself on the back, but they were like good, beautiful scenes. They just didn't fit the novel anymore. It was just too much. It was like unnecessary. So yes. And then some of them were just garbage. Like sometimes you write, you think it's so great, you get up the next morning, it's just garbage. Like I've talked about before, but I spent one night, I was up so late writing and I was so in love with the scene. I got up the next morning and realized I had just written a whole chapter on how to butcher a chicken. Like, all the research I put in and how beautifully I wrote it and the emotions between the characters Didn't matter. It was about butchering a chicken. It was completely unnecessary. So like, but did that help me move forward with my novel? Yes. The more you write, the more you will move forward with your novel. So yes, daily writing habits are so important. And I can tell you this from experience because I do not have time. Like, you guys know what's going on in my life. I've not set aside time to write. I have to like try to scrape it out when I can, and I'm not getting work done. So when you put that first and you have a daily writing habit, yes, it will, you eventually you will get a book. And writing sprints are so helpful.
And for me, I had to schedule office hours.
Mm-hmm.
And put it in my schedule. This is when I'm working, just like if I had to go to a job. Otherwise, I would find some reason to do something else.
Right. Shell says baby steps are good too. 200 words a day can get you a novel in a year, but I also use that goal to write my short stories and was able to finish the projects. That's a good point. Yes, 200 words a day is nothing, right? But at the end of the year, you're going to have a whole novel. That's a really, really good point.
There's a lot of good stuff in the chat, and we
Yeah.
just don't have time to mention it all. So if you're listening, it would be worth it to you to go find us on YouTube and read those comments, because there's some really good advice there. But we have to move on.
One more thing before we move, because I
Okay.
think this is really important, and I mentioned it kind of earlier. If you can get yourself in a writing group, if you can find a group of people, like-minded people, maybe the same genre, but maybe not. Like, we are not the same genre, and we worked really well as a writing group. That will also help you, because I don't think I would be published today if it wasn't having the accountability of these ladies and the others in our writing group. So if you can find a writing group, do that. Sorry.
Matter of fact, I think the only thing the same about us is we love Christ and we're writers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty much it, right?
Yes.
Okay. So now it's time for the feeding of the backs. This is where we have gotten a writing prompt just before the podcast began, and we set a timer for 15 minutes, and we had no time to plan, just write, and no time for revision or editing. And so we're going to read what we wrote live on the air, and because we haven't had time to polish our work, we're only going to give positive feedback, hence the feeding of the backs. So who wants to go first? Should I do eeny, meeny, miny, moe?
I'll go.
Okay.
Yeah, get it over with. So we chose for the sprint prompt today. It was a dark and stormy night. We know that is a negative connotation with this prompt, and so we just wanted to see if we could do something good with it. So it was in quotes, which means you're supposed to use it, not just be inspired by it. And I did use it, but I don't know how I feel about this. I'm just going to read it and then we can talk about it. But I'm not sure how I feel about this or how it's even going to sound, to be honest. It was a dark and stormy night, the kind that roll across the plains like a spooked herd of bison, kicking up debris and plowing over helpless vegetation in its wake. And despite the carnage that it would produce, there was nothing a person could do but hole up in their house and wait for the stampede to pass on. There was nothing to be done to stop the storm. All that could be done was to prepare before the storm hit, to tie down and latch up everything possible and pray that when morning came, the stays would have held and the locks would still be intact. Excuse me. In spite of the dangers of a night like this, Colleen wasn't concerned. She liked storms. She liked the loudness of them, the crashing and the whipping and the rattling that made it impossible to ignore it. She liked the darkness of them, how, when lightning struck, illuminating the entire plain from one end to the other as if it were the middle of the day, only to be returned to complete and utter darkness a moment later, reminding the world that no matter how dark the earth wanted to be in that moment, the storm could wake it up, even for only a moment. These kind of storms would not be ignored, and Colleen looked forward to giving up control for a short time while the good Lord decided what to do with her land. Colleen wrapped a quilt around her shoulders and crawled into the corner of a ragged settee she had turned to face the window. 3, 2, 1.
I love that.
I like it too because it really evokes what you like about reading this genre, what I would like about reading this genre, which is remembering a time when we were really close to the reality that our fortunes and fate is in God's hands and not our own. And I think in the West, especially under capitalism, you feel like you have so much control about whether or not you prosper. And there are not as many opportunities to just sit back and see what God does with your life, because you are constantly told that it's up to you to make something of your life. And so I just really appreciated that.
Thanks.
And I really love the description of the storm. I love storms too.
Me
And
too.
so, like, I was totally there in that, loving every minute of it.
Thanks. So will I use this? Maybe, but this is, I think, a good example of, like, I may just get like a feeling from this. I might get to know my character a little bit more with this. I don't know. I had a direction I was trying to go, and it just quite wasn't getting there. Like, I was trying to reveal something about my character and I never got there. So maybe with more time it will, or maybe this just isn't the route, but it was a good exercise. So Shell says, great setting, Jen. Great line about what the Lord would do with the land.
Yes, exactly.
Thanks. And Gigi says, I like that, Jen. You made the storm one of your characters. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, I appreciate that.
Shell also said something about a certain movie, and so just wait, because here I go.
Oh, no. Okay.
If I hadn't had to include that line and decided I was actually going to do it, I may have made it to the end to my punchline, but I didn't. So.
Oh, okay.
A strange humming sound in Anastasia's head made it hard to think. She could hear voices that seemed to be coming from down a long hallway, far enough to prevent her from understanding what was being said. The humming seemed to intensify with the throbbing in her temples. Loud, quiet, loud, quiet. Maybe it wasn't humming at all. Now it seemed more like static, and the voices seemed closer, although she couldn't make out what was being said. She still couldn't make out what was being said. There, I think I got it, a voice said so close and clear it startled Anastasia. She opened her eyes. A man was standing in front of a TV with his back to her, bent over, fiddling with the buttons along the bottom below the screen. He was dressed in blue scrubs and had a stethoscope around his neck. The voices she'd been hearing were clear now, as well as the picture on the TV. A familiar man sat at a typewriter, the old kind that had ribbon and clacking keys. He was typing on a piece of white paper. It was a dark and stormy night. Then he yanked the paper from the machine, balled it up, and threw it toward a wastebasket before inserting a clean piece of paper. How archaic, she thought. Anastasia tried to think of the name of the man who was typing, but her brain wouldn't access the information. What are you watching? Said a voice from the doorway. A middle-aged woman with brown hair tied back in a ponytail leaned against the doorframe, a tablet in her hand. 3, 2, 1.
So your character coming out of a fog of some sort, but she was watching Throw Mama from the Train. For those who don't know, that movie is from the 80s, I think. And it Billy Crystal stars in it, and he's trying to write the great American novel, and he starts it with, it was a dark and stormy night, and he can't get past that. It's hilarious.
So this is from my story that I've been writing on every week, and she was going to wake up, like suddenly realize, where's my baby? And like have a freak out moment. But I never got there because I was trying to remember Billy Crystal's name and I couldn't. So
yeah, I don't remember
I
either.
just had her not be able to remember his name either.
So in this novel, there's electricity because she's watching TV. I just assumed this was kind of like the same time and setting of the novels you've been doing. So
no,
interesting.
And this is total pantsing.
Awesome.
So yeah, I haven't planned anything.
My brain made it to where that they where that baby was born was like somewhere they had escaped to. That was remote.
Awesome. Well, Shell enjoyed it. She said, "Ha, Tina, I love it."
Thanks, Shell. All right, Jamie, what did you come up with?
373 measly words. Today's been rough.
They were great.
Well, we'll see. When the thunder came on like this, it was so easy to remember the drafty and dark cabin we'd shared all those years ago, and my heart squeezed the memories of Sissy and I as tightly as she would have squeezed my middle all those years ago. The storm's right up upon us, Polly, she would whisper in a voice that quavered, and her little form would jump against me as another clap sounded, and I would be glad for the darkness that concealed my grin. Now it ain't either right up on us, count with me. Together, we would track the number of Mississippis that filled the space between the booming thunder and the flashes of lightning, and I could feel tension drain from the little body as her grip on me simultaneously relaxed. Before long, my sweet little sissy's breathing would ease into the regular rhythm of sound sleep, and once that happened, even the angriest of the heavenly outbursts were not able to reawaken the little worn-out frame. Angriest of outbursts. I contemplated why it was I always associated thunder with anger. I knew I wasn't alone. I'd heard others mention it as roaring. It was the loudness of it, I reckoned, and the way it had an ability to shake you in spite of yourself. The most benign way I'd ever heard it discussed was Papa's unsurprisingly mild rolling. I considered how it seemed everything was so green after a good storm, like the one we were getting tonight, and wondered if it were possible that I'd be able to think of thunder in a different way. Perhaps I could think of the thunder as one of God's ingredients for a more verdant earth, reminding myself such a calamity was necessary in order to produce the kind of harvest we hoped for. I decided to try my theory out on Sissy the next morning when I knew that she of all my siblings would be the most delighted to wake up to everything so brightened and refreshed. Kissed the top of her little head, then extricated myself from her embrace and rolled myself onto my side to drift off to the sounds of the dark and stormy night.
I love this. I love that you're back with, I don't know what the character's name is, but her sister is Sissy. Like, I remember this. You wrote In This World one other time, and I loved it and wanted more. And I love that you're back in there. Like, have you written In This World at all since then? Since that last
Just
time?
every once in a while. No, not except for these sprints. No.
I want more. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I really like this person.
I really do. Like, I want to know more. And even as you're reading it, I feel like there's a pain there that and which I just want to know more. I want to be involved in this person's life. So well done, Jamie. I don't know how you do it. And you wrote 100 more words than I did, and you're complaining about it. I just want to point that out too.
They were struggly today, and I did find myself correcting and changing what I was writing, but I was feeling very artsy, craftsy about it and not so sprinty about it. And I was trying to be careful with it. So that's why I'm simultaneously not satisfied with it. And also, you know, it's a little bit frustrating that I really felt like playing around with it more. But then I also felt pressure to like have it be a story. You know what I mean? So yes, the pressure of the sprint was weird today.
Yeah. Do you remember me coming out of the sprint, what I said? Like, that's exactly, you put into words exactly what I experienced with the sprint today too. Was that like, I got things out of it, but I wanted to spend more time there, and I didn't get exactly what I wanted. Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. It's like, because you felt like a feeling was being evoked, right? And it was like trying to, that's more difficult to do than to say this happened, this happened, this happened. Right. Yeah. Right. So anyway.
Our next sprint book that comes out should be 30 Days of Terrible Writing Sprints. Because even this is a terrible writing sprint, yet we got something out of it, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
I mean, and there's always that argument that any writing you do forwards your career because it makes you a better writer in the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I really loved, well, this is what I loved about listening to you guys' sprints. Jamie described a storm, and you described a storm from two different characters' point of view, that were experiencing the storm in completely different ways.
Yeah.
And they were both so good. And as somebody who loves storms and descriptions of nature, like I just had a great time listening to you guys today.
Thank you. I enjoyed yours too.
Yeah, if I hadn't spent so much time trying to find Billy's Crystal's name on Google, I probably would have finished my sprint.
Ira Glass, who is a radio producer for National Public Radio, famously has a quote. It's very long, so I'll paraphrase for you all. But what he says is, nobody tells beginners that when you first start, your work is going to be awful, but your taste is going to be exquisite. And so when you write something, you're going to look at what you wrote and you're going to say, but this is awful. But the only way to bridge the gap from awful to exquisite is to continue to practice. And in the case of the writer, that is writing. I'm pretty sure I wrote 500,000 words one of these years between during my the course of my marriage. There was a year or two where I was writing every single day. I made myself write every single day. And when I counted up, when I finally broke myself of the habit, I'm sure I would have written over 500,000 words. And I just feel like You just get better from practicing. What other thing would you undertake and never practice? You ever
Right.
going to learn how to play the guitar without practicing? You ever going to learn karate without practicing?
Cooking,
No, you're not.
anything. Yeah.
Nothing. Yeah.
And then you add to that this idea that's been a bunch of my friends are talking about on Facebook right now about how you have to fail to succeed. Like the whole that mixed in with that goes right along with that, because when you see you're running and it's not good enough, then you strive to get better, and that leads you towards success.
Gigi said, wow, Jamie, love these little girls, and you painted such a beautiful picture of the storm. Agreed. And Shell says, calamity is necessary to produce the harvest we hope for. True in nature and spiritually, too. So great, Jamie.
Thanks. I appreciate that, guys.
Okay, well, we should probably move on and go talk about what's next. So, Jamie, do you want to tell us what's next for you?
Yes, I have a newsletter coming out this month, so make sure you go over to www.writingshorts.net. I have a great story going to be featured this month. It'll be sent directly to your email inbox. If you sign up to get my author newsletter, you will also get a free copy of A Knight's Gift, which is a fantasy short that I wrote and is only available when you sign up for my newsletter. WritingShorts.net. Sign up now.
Awesome. Okay, so for me, I'm planning on publishing very soon, hopefully within the next month. So if you haven't read book 1 yet and you want to, it's $2.99 right now for the ebook on Amazon. Lost in the Land of the Midnight Sun by Christina Catane. So you'll want to catch up if you want to read book 2. And that's what I'm working on. That's what's next, is to get all this publishing stuff done. So
that's really exciting, Tina.
I'm glad to be here finally. I really am. What about you, John? What's up for you? What's next?
Well, real quick, I just hit Shell's. Shell says, what's next? Need to finish the review for Calling for Phoebe. And hopefully make a blog post with all the reviews. I love you, Shell. Thank you so much for doing that. So my what's next is, before I realized I could put Scrivener on my Mac for free for a limited time, I thought, you know what, I'm just gonna go ahead and print my novel and I'll just start doing things by hand. And so I took the Scrivener document and I compiled it into Word. And as soon as I opened it up in Word, I saw lots of blue squigglies. And so if you use Word at all, you'll know that that's their editing, and that there were lots of little mistakes, because there's so much of the book that still was just sprinted. Because this first round of editing is really story structure. I don't look for the other things. So I couldn't print it. I just could not do it, because there's going to be so many mistakes. I was just like, I can't do it. So my goal this week is to get to the point where I can start over at chapter 1 and go through and make all of those blue lines go away for right now, so that I can print it by the next weekend to do some more in-depth editing by hand. So that's my goal for this week. Still doing editing. It's still painful. But yeah, my mom, there have been some developments with my mother in the home that she's in. And so life has been a little bit more of a struggle this week. And my schedule has changed for how I'm helping her. And so it's even harder now to edit than it was before. So I really covet your prayers that God would just help me get this book out. But again, I know it's in his timing. So I'm just not going to stress about it, because a lot of what's going on right now is out of my control. So I'm just letting the storm roll around me, and I'm going to cuddle up in my quilt with my Lord and wait for him to let the storm take care of what needs to be taken care of, and let him take care of my land. And then I will wait for the storm to be over and publish when he says it's time.
That's wonderful.
It's an awesome metaphor.
I had no idea that was me, but I think it was me. I think that metaphor that today was me. So
doesn't that happen?
It does. Yeah.
I don't see any more what's next in our chat. And so
I think everyone's still worn out from last week's episode.
I know. It was, how do you top that? This is going to be the one that followed. Right?
I know. And in case you're wondering, no more tattoo. It's gone. Sorry, everybody.
Okay. So I can't really tell you. Let's see. What is our next week's?
We don't have a podcast next week.
That's right. That's why there's not a topic that I can think of.
Right.
Next week is Good Friday. And so we are going to take the Good Friday off. And you guys have a great Easter weekend. We love you all. Yep. And so with that, this concludes this episode of the Christian Indie Writers Podcast. Until next time, may your pen be prolific, your deadlines be met, and may all of your words honor Christ.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.